Yeah, so just two for each. There's 9 students.
Yeah, well,
Councillors. Two for each. So 8. You ready? When I'm just waiting for the emails, but so we're into well, I got 4G outside. Well, it just says pretty slow. I think I'm balanced. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Planning and Development Board. Just for the avoidance made out, we are live and broadcasting, so please be careful.
It means don't swear.
I always feel a bit like the chaplain introduced and speak further if I said don't swear. The evacuation procedure is agenda item number 1. We are not expecting any fire drills or tests this evening, so if the fire alarm does sound, it will almost certainly be a real event. If you do hear the fire alarm, please leave the building by the nearest safest exit, which is likely to be that door at the end of this room, or if you can't use that for whatever reason, the door to the civic suite that you all enter the building by this evening. Please go to assembly point G in the car park, which is just outside the windows over there, and stay there until Mr. Tobin says it is safe to do it otherwise. Please don't just go home because we have a register and we know where you live. Agenda item number 2 is apologies for absence or members away on official council business. I have apologies from Councillor Deakin, who is substituted by Councillor Gosling, Councillor Lees, who is substituted by Councillor Mrs. Humphreys, and Councillor MacDonald, who is substituted for by Councillor Jordan. Are we all content? And welcome Councillor Gosling, Councillor Humphreys and Councillor Jordan. I hope you enjoy the meeting. Agenda item number 3 is disclosable pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. Does anyone have anything they wish to make public? No? Thank you. The next item are the minutes of the board held on the 7th of February. Are you content that I sign them as a true and correct record? So, thank you. And we have the minutes of the planning subcommittee held on the 11th of February. Smooth. Thank you.
Second.
All those in favour? Thank you very much. Members, I would like to just draw your attention to Mr. Sam Patton, who's sitting at the back, who's going to be with us for, I think, 2 years.
Yeah.
So welcome to the authority and welcome to the Planning and Development Board.
Thank you.
I'd also, the other sort of very urgent item is that one of our officers has got to attend an international swimming gala later on this evening. So would you mind if we brought forward item number 10 and dealt with that to allow her to go and put her colleague on?
So moved, yeah. So moved.
Yes, just explain that I am training for a swim event, which is for charity. It's for Diabetes UK. So I might persuade IT at some point to send round my Just Giving link. My objective is to swim the distance of the channel. But if I'm doing well, I'm going to try and swim the distance of the channel there and back.
Well, as somebody who takes pills for diabetes, please do well. I only drown with dignity. Well, good luck with that. And please do send the link round.
Oh, thank you.
So, agenda item 10, over to you.
Oh, right, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so this is a report concerning HS2 and the arrangements around the proposed extension of a tunnel coming out of Birmingham, and the proposal is that it should merge at Wateraughton. So you received a report in October 21 about concerning the advice that we had received that suggested that the works weren't authorised by the HS2 Act. The board resolved at the time that some work that was in progress wasn't at that time. It wasn't expedient at that time to take enforcement action. And that was based on a balance of considering that the project is a major infrastructure project that's advanced in the national interest, and in light of a dialogue that had been established with HS2, and some action that they'd taken to look at a different solution for the siting of the substation in Water in the county. This report offers an update on what's happened since October 21. And that's essentially that HS2 presented an HS2 application called a Schedule 17 application for works that included the portal to the tunnel that is proposed. Based on the legal advice that we had received, we declined to determine the application. HS2 then subsequently appealed against that non-determination. And that appeal is currently before the Planning Inspectorate. We've been advised that it's to be now heard as a hearing, and that hearing will take place at the end of April. The report indicates May, June, but we've managed to find a date suitable to everybody at the end of April. So the inspector will firstly determine whether he has jurisdiction over the appeal. So he'll be making his own judgment about the differing arguments of legal interpretations to whether the works are or are not covered by the Act. And then if he determines that the works are covered by the Act, then he'll go on to make a decision around the Schedule 17 considerations. So HS2 has continued to construct the works associated with the preparations for the portal and elements of the portal itself. It indicates that it is confident in its interpretation of the law, and it is cognizant of the implications of halting construction works to the programme and costs associated with the construction. So officers are in a position where they where the dialogue about these works is quite fluid. We've been talking to HS2, not as often as we might have liked to, but the dialogue has resumed. We're talking to the main works contractor and we're talking to the Department of Transport. But we are mindful that we need to continue to keep an assessment of the expediency of enforcement action. And that will be an assessment of the sort of specific harms, but also an assessment of the of any harms to sort of process. And the report really basically asks for authority to because we might need to move swiftly if we do get to the position where we deem enforcement action to be expedient. We've asked for authority to delegate enforcement action to the Chief Executive in consultation with members.
Thank you, Doug. Could you just remind us where the special management zone is? I've forgotten.
The special management zone is essentially North Warwickshire part of the borough. So it's the Delta Junction, and it will then also cover phase 2B, if and when that happens.
And who's the chairman of that?
It is Ian Thomas.
Thanks very much. Members, Councillor Durham.
It's not a question, it's an observation. Might hear me a little bit better. It's an observation, really, that we really need to delegate this so that action can be taken as quickly as possible, because from the start of this, there's been no slowdown of construction. And it seems to me that the whole process is being dragged out in little quarters, so that by the time any decision comes out, it will be too late because the work has already been done. So I think we should support these recommendations as fully as I think it's disgraceful that they didn't stop when this question arose, that we don't have control over that, unfortunately.
Councillor Hayfield?
Do you know what? I think I prefer tunnels to you can't see trading tunnels here so much. But seriously, I think the recommendations are absolutely apposite to the situation, really. It gives up, it keeps members informed, and it gives officers the opportunity to react fairly swiftly to events. I think our general views on high speed 2 and its impact on our borough is fairly well known by everyone. So I've got every faith that they will work in the right direction. So,
Second. Thanks, both. I'm sure you remember that last week we agreed to set up a group of members consisting of the head of development control, chairman, opposite clerk, and councillor Rose to review the HS2 proposal. I think, to be honest with you, just to be in keeping with that, I'd like to see a recommendation be amended to chief executive, head of development control, chairman, councillor Phillips, councillor Rose, and local members, plus anybody else that would like to be a member of that group. I think it's absolutely right that we need the subgroup to be able to act quickly.
no problem with that, Chair.
Thank you. Members, I give you my assurance that whenever that group is ready to meet, we'll notify everybody so that those who would like to go can go as well. If there are no other questions, that's been proposed and seconded with the slight alteration in B. I see those in favour. That's unanimous. Thank you very much.
I feel like a shaker now. Thank you, everybody.
Given that you're looking after all the HS2 applications, I don't think Sherco actually fits.
Cheers. Good evening, everybody.
Yes, thank you very
For all
much.
the work that she's done.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. So, members, we'll now go back to the printed agenda. And we're on to agenda item number 6. And the first planning application to deal with is number 214 for the Philomath Cricket Club, Blackhall Lane, Philomath. Mr. Brown, anything to add to your report?
Let me just run through the slides for you, Mr. Chairman. This one and the next one are unusual in the sense that we don't often have applications to divert planning footpaths for you. It's been a little while since we have done. But as the report explains, we can divert footpaths under the Planning Act as a consequence of the grant of a planning permission. And these two, this one and the next one, fall into that category. These replicate the paper plans that you have. Planning permission was granted some time ago for a new second pitch along the off Blackhall Lane, which is here.
Mr. Brown, can you get your attention behind you?
Behind you.
They're not showing you. They're not coming up.
Okay.
I'm sure we're not the only people that wanted to shout, she's behind you.
No, she's not.
I know
don't scare her. She's not a big fan. Did you know you got on the planning list? Oh, sorry. Easy just to move the recommendation, Chairman.
Well, we will need it for subsequent applications as well. Drawings are on paper, in the paper.
I think we need to buy IT printer.
Reserve is a announcement. Shout. Oh, here we are. No, it's on this one.
Can you turn it down first?
As I said, I'm all right, Jack. Probably broken this.
No, you've done it.
We're just doing zooming on yours.
You working tonight? No, not till Saturday.
This is because it's a shorter jacket family. It will need to bulk it out for somebody else.
We've actually had it a long time. So, I think she's stubborn. Well, she's not really something.
Councillor Hickman, given that you are an IT expert, is there anything you could do?
Switch it off.
Shout very loud,
Councillor?
Control Alt Delete.
Sit behind.
I'm just like that's Brian then to give us one of his stories.
Oh, do you mean the council of the Ukrainian time?
Yes.
I'm very proud of that. Yes.
Well, we could always go back to the fashion. Mr. Brown sort of visually.
Yeah,
Where they
we go this way then.
There's a light flashing on the dogs there. Is that relevant? No, that's a headphone. That's it. Oh, sorry. Oh, that. There we go.
When you see that, I thought it was council bells for the rest of the
Bring the fish and chips.
Just wants to get warm. Oh, you see? Chair.
Well, I think if members have got their iPads and I've got this one, so.
If anybody is watching it.
It's
Yeah.
already been moved and seconded.
Is there anything you'd like to draw to our attention specifically on this application?
No, Mr. Chairman, as I say, the plans that are in the paper show where the second pitch has been granted planning permission. The diversion is around the side of the new pitch, so therefore there's no issue in terms of the reasonableness of the diversion. That's the reason why it's recommended for approval.
And we now have no objection. So I think, so you proposed it, councillor Hickman?
Yes.
And seconded by, thank you very much. So all those in favour? Any against? Thank you very much. We now move on to application number 184 for the Arc School, Astley Lane, Antley. Exactly the same comments? Mr.
Exactly the
Brown?
same comments, Mr. Chairman. The plan which you have on the paper shows the diversion. It's around a new school, and this is more a safeguarding issue than anything else.
Second.
Thank you very much. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. And now we need to move to our speaker, Mr. Luke Coppy, who's joining us by Teams, I hope. Mr. Coppy,
I am here. Can you hear me?
we can indeed.
And see you. Yeah, can you show us?
Somehow you've managed to beat the IT gremlins, Mr. Coppy. In the normal course of events, I'd like Mr. Brown to introduce his report and then we'll call you to speak. So, Mr. Brown. Lear Marston Depot, Coton Road, Lear Marston, application number 562 Anything to add to your report, Mr. Brown?
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members have already visited the site a couple of months ago, so therefore that they're aware of the setting of the site and the fact that the actual solar panel systems here are set back from Haunch Lane, and those are shown on the plans which you have connected to the paper copy you have in front of you. The site on Appendix A is off Haunch Lane, as you can see. It's at the back of the Coton Road depot, and Appendix A at the bottom shows you the solar array set back from Haunch Lane. Appendix B shows you the wider setting of the site with the zones that are referred to in the board report. The proposal actually is in zone 4 on Appendix B, when you see the other zones there which are referred to in the report. In this particular case, Mr. Chairman, the proposal is inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. But as the report indicates, it has very limited actual greenbelt harm, and there are also limited other harms. So therefore, in balancing that against the benefits, we consider that those benefits outweigh the harms, and therefore give rise to the very special circumstances necessary to support the scheme. You'll note that Lee Marston Parish Council also agrees with that understanding. And therefore, Mr. Chairman, the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Coffey, welcome to the meeting. I'm just going to hand you over to Mr. Tobin, who will explain public speaking. Mr. Tobin.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Mr. Coffey. In a moment, you'll be given the opportunity to address the board. You'll be allowed 3 minutes to speak. I shall tell you when your 3 minutes begins, when you have 1 minute remaining, and then at the end of your time.
Thank you. Members, thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of DEFRA in connection with the planning application for the construction of a photovoltaic installation on land within the existing Environment Agency depot at Lee Marston. The Environment Agency and DEFRA are seeking to deliver a completely carbon neutral site within their estate portfolio at Lee Marston depot, aligning with the greening government commitments and green growth strategy, along with the recognition of the Warwickshire climate emergency. The proposed photovoltaic installation will have a maximum capacity of 3 megawatts and will deliver a range of benefits associated with achieving carbon neutrality. The proposed project forms part of a wider master plan for the Lee Marston depot, which seeks to further develop and enhance the site through a series of positive interventions, taking into account the site constraints and opportunities. The master plan covers 4 projects across separate zones within the site boundary, and it is proposed that these will be delivered in a series of phases across a number of years, with this being the first project to come forward. The design of the photovoltaic installation has carefully considered the surrounding site context and is located within an area previously used for landfilling associated with the dredging of the nearby lakes. It is also located within the Greenbelt, and you will note from the planning application that there is a strong justification for this and a clear, very special circumstances case demonstrated. This includes the resultant carbon savings, the contribution the scheme will make towards the UK's commitment to net zero carbon emissions and supporting the Warwickshire climate emergency. The very special circumstances presented clearly outweighs any harm to the Greenbelt, which is limited due to the current site conditions, being largely enclosed from existing screening and self-contained within Lee Marston depot. The benefits of the proposals also outweigh any other harm resulting from the development, as evidenced within the planning application submission. Importantly, the scheme has sought to maximise biodiversity enhancements on site, noting its location within the Tame Valley wetlands, and there will be a positive biodiversity net gain of approximately 10.5% resulting from the proposals. Following the discussions with the Parish Council and the Tame Valley Wetland Partnership, there is also a commitment to work together in developing the detailed design for the ecological enhancements and the long-term management of the site. The planning application before you has been the subject of an extensive programme of engagement with officers, and you will see from the committee report that all matters have been resolved, and a series of planning conditions are proposed to ensure that there will be an appropriate level of control and management of the facility. The proposed development fully complies with national and local planning policy, and I kindly request that you support this scheme, which will deliver significant benefits associated with addressing the challenge of climate change, including carbon savings and enhancements to the Tame Valley wetlands. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Coffey. Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? No? Just one from me, Mr. Coffey. Are you proposing any sort of grazing or other farming to go on in between the photovoltaic panels, or is that something yet to be determined?
Not at the moment, but it's something that I don't think would probably operationally work with the installation. But as part of the proposals and subsequent conditions, there is a commitment to work with the Tame Valley Wetland Partnership in putting together an ecological enhancement strategy that will deliver on the net gain, and we'll look at a range of measures as how best to maximise biodiversity on the site.
And just a quick follow-on to that, given that this is land that was previously used to store or put the silt, thank you, that was taken from the purification lakes, is the land here contaminated?
There is a condition related to further investigation of contaminated land, I believe, on the that you'll see on the back of the committee report. So there will be further investigation to ensure that that it is that it's an operationally safe site, and also as part of the it is also the intention to surrender the existing permit on the site as well as part of this scheme coming forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And there's no other questions, Mr.
The recommendation.
Thank you. That's been proposed.
I'll second that.
Seconded. Members, all those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. So we now move on to application number 663, land to the north east of Junction 10 at Dordon in North Yorkshire. Mr. Brown, anything to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In terms of the appendices that you have on your papers, then I'll draw you to Appendix B, which in fact includes the site. To the left hand, a block there, that's the South Birchmoor, north of the A5, and to the east of the M42 is the application site. The remainder of the land there is other land, which is in the control of the applicant. And then the plan on Appendix A shows that additional land on to the east of the application site, which is shaded, where there could be biodiversity gains and landscaping gains as indicated in the report. Now, turning the page on for Appendix D and E, these are the parameters plans which we referred to in the report and indicate the potential for a layout of the site. This is not as yet agreed or proposed. This is an idea of what could happen on the site, and it gives some degree of flexibility for the applicant if a planning permission is granted as to what might be provided. So those are purely illustrative. The images of Appendix E, the report indicates that they do show the development added. They do not, I'm afraid, Mr. Chairman, that's my mistake. But they do give you a range of photographs taken of the application site. And clearly at the determination stage, those will be updated to show the development actually on site itself. Appendix G gives you some idea of the cross sections and planting that's being proposed. Appendix H shows you where the footpaths will be diverted and the new paths to connect to Dordon. And then finally, Appendix I gives you the access details onto the A5. There is one appendix, or was one appendix missing, Mr. Chairman, which is Appendix J. I've circulated that last week, and there are additional hard copies around the table tonight for members to look at. But as I say, this is an introductory report, and therefore we will be coming back to this particular item at the determination stage, and members should have read that by that particular time. The applicant, they're not speaking tonight, but they've asked me to raise one or two issues on the report, and I will do so. The first is that the report refers to an overnight HGV parking facility. They've asked me to point out to members that that is the correct proposal, and that any reference to HGV parking in the report should be taken in that context. In other words, an overnight HGV parking facility. They've asked me to reiterate the point I made that the parameters plan are illustrative only, and they did, if approved, they will give some degree of flexibility for the development at a later stage. The report, Mr. Chairman, as you'll note, refers to building heights. But if you've looked at the parameters plan, you'll see that the parameters plan refers to heights of buildings above ordnance data and not actual heights. The applicant has indicated this is the approach taken to the St Modwyn's development on the other side of the road, and therefore they're following suit. Our view was that members would much prefer to see the height of a building rather than something above AOD, but we'll make that clear when the report comes back to you at a later stage. Also, there's reference in the report to the percentage taken up by landscaping and landscaping and ecology enhancements on the site. They pointed out that this should be 30% of the site and not the 9%, which is referred to in the report. These matters, Mr. Chairman, will be picked up in the determination report as we go through the process. But the applicant has asked me, particularly as they're not here tonight, to draw members' attentions to those corrections as they see them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Members, as you know, this is a report for you to note and to determine whether we have a site visit, how we have a site visit, and if Mr. Brown's initial report has raised the issues that you would like to see considered in future reports. This is absolutely not a report that either seeks to give or not to give planning consent. That will happen at a later stage. And I'm sure you will all have a significant amount of comments in favour and against the application at the relevant time. But tonight is not the opportunity to do that. I think Councillor Hancock's first, then Councillor Parsons, then Councillor Mawson, then Councillor Burnett.
I haven't actually indicated you.
I'm going to do it.
I'm not sure. Can I just
okay? We'll bring you in later then. So, Councillor Hancock.
Effectively, all I was going to do is move the recommendation that we have a site visit. Obviously, it's a lot of concern within the local area, especially as it's been cleared that this is an overnight HGV parking, which is one of the biggest concerns that residents have raised. And this planning application has already been passed through everybody's letterbox within the 3 villages. So I think a site visit to understand the actual parameters of where the warehouses are going, where is the lorry park going, also the buffer from the houses at Birchmoor to them. These are the big key indicators. And obviously the effect on the A5. So if the site visit, we can actually understand how close this is coming to people's houses, how much of a visual aspect this is going to have on the whole of the area, because we do have to make that clear so we can make a determination as this will be within the strategic gap.
Thank
I'd
you.
like to move the recommendation then.
Councillor Mawson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it was Councillor Phillips who told me. Never mind. Yes,
Oh, sorry, was it Councillor Phillips I saw rather than?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. But we'll do you then.
Thank you. Yeah. I'd like to second that as not only the concern about the lorry park, there's also the concern about HGVs on the Watley Street. The A5 is coming again into it. But it would be nice for all members, all planning members, to see the area restraint stroke, what meaningful gap, stroke strategic gap as it's called now, from the time when we was in, so to see how it affects North Warwickshire. And I'll second it.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips.
My only thing was to request that we could have a site visit, but it's a proper organised one, where we all, rather than we go in dribs and drabs.
Yeah, correct.
We could have an organised one, would be better, I think.
I think that's an application of this order,
Yeah.
this impact. I think it has to be. Councillor Derricks. Change your mind.
Yes, I have. Sorry, Tim.
Thank you. Most of what I wanted to say has already been said. But I think that another comment that I would like to make is that it would be very useful if the illustrative material we are given is a little bit more accurate in its portrayal of what might be on the ground. The cross-section of the bund to me looks totally out of scale to what will actually be there. You look at what is there. We've got part of the Amazon forest growing on top of a very, very large bank. And at its widest, I think it was 140 40 metres wide, and in places it's down to 10 metres. The nearest place to Dordon is only 20 metres wide, I think, which is a third of the height. Some of the trees in my garden. Not my garden here.
I think that's a fair point, Councillor David. So certainly when I was looking at the photographs earlier on, I do think it's important that if we're having these illustrative pictures of what it looks like now and what it might look like, that they're actually a bigger scale, so that you're not looking at a large building which is a couple of millimetres tall, but just the scale on the plan. So if you could ensure that we have the reasonable pictures, that would be helpful. And indeed, we'll need to consider the potential impact on the site visit as well. Councillor Parsons.
Thank you, Chair. I absolutely support everything that's been said. The site visit is essential. But I think one aspect of the site visit that we should be considering as well is the actual A5 itself. This particular stretch of the A5 is traffic light corridor, basically, and yet another sort of setup like that put on this already sort of quite difficult and overloaded stretch of road. So in terms of the site visit, I think we should consider the impact of the A5 and what this additional entrance and exit will bring to this situation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Anyone? Councillor Humphries?
Cumulative effect of the vehicles, so that when we actually get around to looking at it properly, we can have some proper numbers. You think they're putting 100 place lorry park at Little Wigston, which is at junction 11. We're going to have 155 place at junction 9. We've already got the service station. This is another one. We just doubled the size recently of what's at Crawley. And every time we talk about HGV and new buildings that come up, they're always able to absorb their own vehicles. And all of a sudden, we're now going to have effectively 500 or 600 lorry parks in a very short period of time. So I'd just like to have some detail about how much HGV movement and overnight stops would happen. I do understand where we are is actually just 4 hours from Immingham, 4 hours from Southampton. I do understand that that does cause us a problem. But I'd just like some proper numbers to talk about rather than guesswork when we get around to talking about them.
Thank you. So, Mr. Brown, if you could follow up on the illustrative pictures and particularly the impact, the cumulative impact on this site, as well as the issues in your report. And I think, Councillor Hancock, you moved that the report be noted and a site visit be agreed.
And that's seconded.
Seconded. So all those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Members, we now move on to consultation application number 6 for land at Langley, bound by Windward Road in Sutton Coldfield and North Yorkshire. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was referred to you at the last meeting, and a group of members was asked to convene to look at this and other major applications outside of the borough and their potential impacts on the borough itself. This is one of them, and as the report indicates, that group has now met, and the observations which are in the original report have been bolstered as a result of that, and they're outlined in the 4 or 5 bullet points in the report. And the recommendation, Mr. Chairman, repeats what was in your last report and also what was said by the group of members that met.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I'd just like to thank the members who were able to join that. It was very useful to go through this application and a couple of others. It was very worthwhile, and I'd like us to carry on meeting for other large applications. Members, any comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. And seconded by... Thank you. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. And we now move on to the application consultation number 5 for the Hinkley National Railway Interchange. Mr. Brown.
This is the second of the ones that the group looked at, Mr. Chairman, and as you can see here, the recommendation as a result of meeting that group was that we should object to the proposal unless the matters to raise in the original report, plus the additional bullet points in this particular report, are not satisfied by the Secretary of State.
Thank you much. Members, any comments or questions?
Again, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All those in favour? And unanimous again. Members, we now move on to application number 350 for land to the south of Gardener's Cottage, Cooley Lane, Colesworth. Mr. Mark Mann has indicated he'd like to speak to us on Teams. So, Mr. Mann, if you could stand by while Mr. Bennett introduces his report.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, the report refers to representations that we've received on page 6G/83. There's been further correspondence with an objector in the past couple of days who's drawn our attention to the fact that there are some containers on the site and also that some of the hedgerows have been reduced in height. At the present time, does not constitute a breach of planning control, but speaking to the applicants today, we have an undertaking that no further work will take place until such time as a planning permission may be granted. But we will keep an eye on that, Mr. Chairman, as we go through. In this respect, members will be aware there's an outline plan permission has been granted here for the 40 houses, advanced appeal. And the application that you have in front of you tonight is the application for approval of reserved matters. In other words, the detail of the layout, design, access and appearance. And those that and members now have those. In terms of the recommendation, Mr. Chairman, the County Council no longer has an objection, and any comments that it has made will be able to add it into any planning permission by condition. So at the present time, we're comfortable with the details, and clearly the recommendation is one of minded to support, and that will continue. Within the report, Mr. Chairman, you'll see that there's an outstanding matter to do with affordable housing, and that's referred to in the report. I need to point out to members that there is a Section 106 agreement running parallel to this particular application, and that 106 obliges the developer to provide 40% provision of affordable housing on site. So that would be 16 in this particular case, and that the details of the affordable housing scheme are subject of council approval before development commences. So the council does in fact have control over that scheme, even though it's not shown or illustrated on the plans that you have in front of you. I feel that ought to, as I know members give substantial weight to affordable housing provision, and that's been obvious from the various applications that the board has looked at. But clearly it's not contained in the current planning application because this is just looking at the detail of the scheme. I think that it might be worthwhile and prudent to incorporate into the current planning application, if planning permission is granted, a condition which reflects the Section 106 obligation. In other words, no development shall start on site until an affordable housing scheme, the provision of 40% provision on site, is agreed by the council. But the applicant is aware of that because it's already in the 106, so it's no surprise at all if that condition was added. In other words, it becomes visible in terms of members of the public and members of the planning board. I would also recommend, Mr. Chairman, that because that involves an agreement on the scheme on affordable housing before commencement, that gives us time for perhaps members to be involved in a meeting with the applicant in order to look at the details of that particular scheme. So that in fact members are aware of that at a very early stage. As I said before, I think members are very aware of the need to provide affordable housing on housing sites. So, Mr. Chairman, the recommendation, I would make quite a little bit of a variation to the recommendation. It's still in 3 parts. Certainly minded to support the plans as submitted. There's a pre-commencement condition be included, requiring approval of the affordable housing scheme by the council, and that the applicant be invited to meet a group of members as soon as possible in order to discuss the content of that scheme along with a review of the conditions as currently recommended. I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chairman, with the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Rand. Just before I go to Mr. Mann, could you explain to me what a Gabion wall is?
Basically, Mr. Chairman, it's when you see the stones in cages, that's a Gabion wall.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Mann, welcome to the meeting. Mr. Tobin will explain the rules to you, so I'll hand over to him. Mr. Tobin.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Mr. Mann. In a moment, given 3 minutes in which to address the board, I will tell you when your 3 minutes commences. I'll remind you when you have 1 minute left, and I'll tell you at the end of that time. The 3 minutes starts now.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the board, for allowing me to speak in favour of this application for reserved matters. As clarified by the Head of Development Control, the matter in front of members today is the consideration of the details of the appearance, layout, scale and landscaping of the proposed 40 homes on this site. Access is not considered at this time, as that was agreed at the outline stage. The details before you this evening are the culmination of many months' work and have been heavily influenced by both national and local planning policy, comments from consultees and discussions with both officers and members. This iterative design process commenced long before we submitted the application in June last year, with the submission of a preliminary inquiry application back in 2020. Over that period, the design of the scheme has evolved and has been improved upon until, as the Head of Development Control comments, the proposals are welcomed in design terms. And in concluding his report, he states, it is considered that the details of the layout, landscaping, scale and appearance of this proposal do meet the expectations set out within the original master plan that was agreed at the outline planning application stage. It thus satisfies the relevant policies in the development plan. Importantly, the issues of affordable housing are not being considered in this application for reserved matters. The reserved matters to be determined today are tenure blind, and the design of the scheme will not need to change if the level of affordable homes changes. Nevertheless, the scheme in front of you today was designed at the outset to accommodate affordable homes at 40%, 2 of which would be 2-bedroom bungalows. The level of affordable homes is subject to control by the council via the Section 106 agreement attached to the outline consent. Any alterations to the terms of that agreement are subject to a separate process, and this process remains firmly in the control of the council. Lagan Homes, as a small medium enterprise, is particularly sensitive to any delay in getting approval and starting on site. Hence why we take advantage of making preliminary inquiries before we submit a planning application, in the hope that they will help minimise the risk of delay. We note the concerns raised by the nearby care home and are aware of how construction activities may impact upon their residents. As a responsible house builder, we will, when devising the construction management plan, have special regard to the residents and will liaise with the home to see how best we can minimise any impacts on them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mann. Members? Councillor Bell?
Thank you. Can I just check my understanding of what you just said? So the 106 agreement is part of reserve matters because it's already been agreed? Is that what you said? Sorry, I'm just trying to check.
Sorry, is that a question for myself?
You, yes. Sorry.
Yeah. But basically, at the outline stage, there was a Section 106, or a unilateral in this instance, attached to that consent, and that requires affordable housing to be provided at 40%.
Sorry, and so that stands because that's already been agreed.
That stands. That's agreed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Mann, I genuinely heard your comments about the concern over delays in getting planning consent. Is that what led you to start work before this meeting?
Well, as the Head of Development Control has just mentioned, we have not started works. What we are doing is basically doing site preparation works, and that includes some sort of like hedgerow works, because obviously we are limited as to what time of year we can actually do those works. But we haven't commenced construction.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other questions? Councillor Mawson?
Yeah, I was just commenting on what you said about hedgerows and containers.
I just have one other question, Mr. Mann, because I'm generally looking forward to the opportunity to review the application with you. We've had 2 letters of objection, and one of the points raised by objectors was that the adjacent property is a care provider and residents will be affected by construction traffic, noise and disturbance, and they talk about overshadowing and disproportionate effect on local residents. Could you explain to us how your company will deal with local residents so that we can understand how their concerns will be addressed?
Well, obviously, any form of construction will have impacts on the neighbouring properties, etc. But as a responsible developer, we will try to minimise those impacts. You can't get away from the fact that, yes, there's going to be obviously large lorries coming in occasionally and things like that, certainly when you're doing the site clearance and muck away, etc. But we will endeavour to minimise impacts. As I've already mentioned, we will have discussions with the care home in particular, because obviously the residents of that care home might be particularly sensitive to construction works, loud noises, etc. So we'd like to see how best we can mitigate those impacts. For example, rather than the typical Harris fencing you put round sites to make them secure, it may be more appropriate backing onto the care home to provide some sort of close boarded fencing so people can't see into the site, but possibly more importantly, it will reduce any noise coming from the site, etc.
Thank you. I would like to understand as we go on more about how you'll be able to control and contain the ill effects, because as you say, every development has noise and dust and what have you. Yeah. But we've had pointed out to us particularly that some users are going to be materially affected by dust that might emanate from the site. So I think it would be helpful for us to have some more information that we can share with residents who are genuinely concerned about this issue.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and as I say, we will, be producing a construction management plan. That's, I think, covered by Condition 8 of the original outline. But in preparing that plan, we will have discussions, as I say, particularly with the care home as well as offices, to see how best we can minimise impacts.
Thank you.
I just have one question. So we're talking about the outlay of the houses at the site. Now, if I remember rightly, you've got 2 5-bedroom houses. Now, if I remember rightly from previous meetings, the site at Grendon had this in their 5-bedroom houses, and they actually came back to us and said they weren't selling, they couldn't see the point in 5-bedroom houses, so they wanted more 3 bedrooms. So in the layout, what at that bit of your research do you think that you need 2 5-bedroom houses at Pooley View?
Well, obviously, what we try to do when looking at layouts and things like that is trying to optimise what we think the market will require in that particular location. So we contact local agents, etc., who are used to selling houses in the area to see what the demand is. And that sort of like largely dictates what we believe will be the appropriate mix for the market homes. In terms of the affordable homes, then obviously we liaise with your own housing officers, etc., and registered providers to come up with an appropriate mix in that respect. And yeah, even in the sort of like indicative mix that we have for the affordable housing at the moment, we have, as I say, largely 2 and 3 bedroom properties, as I say, including the 2 bungalows, but we also have 1 4-bedroom property, which is come to us in terms of your housing offices requiring a 4-bedroom property as an affordable home.
Thanks.
Too soon.
And there are no other questions for you, Mr. Mann, so thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Chair.
Right.
Councillor Derrick.
We're out of questions. I'm very pleased that Mr. Brown is suggesting that we condition this to protect the affordable housing, because I picked up on this as well. I find it very concerning that this is an application which we turned down, which then went to appeal and was granted with these conditions already in there, with the 106 agreement for 40% housing, and yet now we are being told that this developer has come back and is challenging that. Surely that agreement was part of the appeal, and that if that part of it falls, should not the rest of the application go back to an appeal? It just does not seem reasonable to come back and just say, right, well, I've won it with those conditions on appeal, now I'm going to change those. I think we should stick to those. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons.
Thank you, Chair. Really, it's a question for Mr. Brown in that sense. It seems to me that the affordable housing element of this development is absolutely essential to actually bring it successfully into the area. Maybe I'm a little bit puzzled being told that 40% is being held, and Mr. Brown is telling us that we need a recommendation to hold to the 40%. I wonder if you could just explain what's going on here for me, Mr. Brown.
It's basically reinforcing the 106, Councillor Parsons. The 106 is a legal agreement, and therefore the developer can't get out of that agreement. It has to have council approval if that particular agreement is to be varied. So if the 40% is to be varied, it has to have approval in any event. What I've been saying is that Section 106 is a separate matter which would not normally come in front of members or indeed members of the public. In order to make it visible, I'm suggesting replicating the 106 obligation as a condition to make it absolutely clear to everybody that the control of the affordable housing scheme still rests with the council. And should there not be an agreement, then clearly there might be a breach of condition as well as a breach of the 106. So in fact, it's strengthening the council's position.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. That seems eminently sensible. Yes, thank you.
And members, as you, I'm sure, remember, Section 106 agreement is stronger for the authority than the other condition. Councillor Hayfield.
Chairman, I'm sure you'll point out very quickly if this is going off on too much of a tangent. We do need the affordable housing of whatever sort across the borough. You don't necessarily always need a chunk of it from in one place. Quite often, the affordable housing that we actually need in the borough is more pepper potted all over the place. And I just wonder at the opportunities to actually use a financial contribution to help provide pepper potted affordable housing elsewhere in the borough where it's needed. Now, if I'm taking you off the wrong track on it, I apologise, but it just strikes me that when we're dealing with a fairly large development, there's a large chunk of affordable housing, we might want to think a little bit more about where we do want our affordable housing, or whether we do want it as family affordable housing, or whether we want it as older people's affordable housing.
I think that's, again, a good issue for the board to talk about, Councillor Hayfield. And I think in the past, Mr. Brown, we specifically asked for the Housing Department to come and talk to the board about perceived needs, about what's on the waiting list and how we can best address them. I'm sure will remember, Councillor Hayfield, one of the things that we've been trying to do is look at the balance between rented housing and housing that's, if you like, help to buy or part shared ownership, and they all have a part. Every specific allocation site has its terms and conditions and its particular needs. Every village and town has its own particular needs, and yes, we have to be cognizant of all of that and listen to all of the issues. Councillor Parsons,
if I may come back on that, Chair. There has been a considerable amount of development in Poleswood in over the last 3 years, and actually affordable housing hasn't been terribly well represented in that development. There is a very considerable need for affordable housing in Poleswood. All of us councillors who represent the area know of the real need that there is for affordable and actually for rented housing in the area. And yes, pepper pot might be a solution, but actually pepper pot might be a way of not actually getting the affordable housing that we need. And the priority, I believe, in the region I represent, is to get the affordable housing that we need. And that is why I'm supporting Mr. Brown's recommendation.
So, Mr. Brown, could you remind us of your revised recommendation to the board?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there are three parts to it. First of all, minded to support the plans as submitted. There's a pre-commencement condition being included on the list of conditions requiring approval of an affordable housing scheme. That's pre-commencement, Mr. Chairman, so that has to be done up front. And then thirdly, that the applicant be invited to meet a group of members as soon as possible in order to discuss the content of that scheme. And in light of what's being said this evening, Mr. Chairman, that's the place for that discussion, along with a review of the conditions as currently recommended.
Thank you. Members, in terms of who's part of that group, I'd suggest myself, Councillor Phillips, Councillor Rose, local members. Is that acceptable? Yeah.
Remove that recommendation, then, Chair.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We now move on to application for consultation number 10 and 11 for the Barwell Sustainable Urban Extension. Mr. Brown.
Well, again, Mr. Chairman, referring back to the Langley Sue and to the Operator Terminal proposals, subsequent to that group meeting, Mr. Chairman, to the last planning board, these two consultations came in, and these two were then referred to that group with your agreement. So the group could look at everything combined. And in this particular case, as you'll see from the plan attached to the report Appendix A, these two particular sites are on the north side of Hinckley at Barwell and Earl Shilton, and therefore the group felt that there would be limited impacts on the borough, and the recommendation reflects that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions or comments? Or proposals? Thank you, Councillor Phillips. And secondly, Councillor Hancock. All those in favour? That's again unanimous. Thank you very much. Agenda item number 7 is the the infrastructure funding statement. Brown?
Well, again, Mr. Chairman, this is a report that has to be done annually. It was done last year at the end of 2020, 2021's. Given the position, I can answer any questions, Mr. Chairman, if there are any from members.
Councillor
I was reassured to know that we weren't handing any 106 money back. I hope that was the case. It looked as if it was in the paper. And on page 117, from 2.7 downwards, we've got a list of some of the things that the money that's remaining will be spent on. And that's fine, but to me it doesn't look very strategic. Now, I know that perhaps we haven't built quite so many houses in the previous years as we're about to build. So therefore the 106 money may be less than we might expect in the future. It strikes me that this is a really important thing. What are we going to do with our 106 money? What's our strategic plan for this borough, and where are the priorities? And I did ask before this meeting who the officer was responsible for this, and Mr. Brown, all fingers pointed to you, and I think you're really busy. So I think it strikes me that we are in the housing development that we're expecting, we probably need additional resource. And I would also like to see a members subcommittee on 106 so that we can work with officers to get a strategy for this and push to get the resource that's needed, Mr. Brown, so you're not working weekends.
You do know it's called capability. Councillor Hayfield?
Yeah, I'd like to support that. I think it's a strategic element of Section 106. Sometimes seems a bit distant. We've got a local plan that tells us what we want to be doing off the borough in 5 years, over 5 years. And we know there's going to be elements of that. They're going to bring in 106. We know there's going to be elements of each individual site that is going to require some amelioration through 106. But there is also part of the sort of the general infrastructure of the borough that these sites will impact on, that we also be planning for the, this may happen on an occasion, but it doesn't seem to be as joined up as one might have hoped. So the local plan gives us the background to do it on, but we're not actually almost like sort of strategically planning our 106 to tie in with the local plan and its overall objectives.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll not support. I mean, I think there used to be, or there is somewhere, somewhere in the vaults, a 106 committee somewhere waiting to back into action. And I think with the same sentiment that or structure that Councillor Ayfield has mentioned, I think that was the ethos behind it when it was put together some time ago. And I'd like to support that recommendation, Chair. If it's a recommendation, I'll support it.
Councillor Parsons.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I would absolutely like to support the recommendation. I think it's a sensible recommendation and a good move. And I'm just a little concerned by the term strategic, not overly, but concerned. Obviously, the major impact of these developments is going to be felt in the places that are developed, and we do need to consider the strategic impact on the borough. But in particular, we need to consider the strategic needs of the places that are primarily being developed. And as such, I would recommend that, that local members of where the primary development sites occur should feature very prominently.
Councillor Dermot.
Basically, I was going to say the same thing, except to point out that quite a lot of 106 funding is linked to specific places, and that needs to be taken into consideration in any planning that is taken forward. I would certainly support the suggestion that has been made, recommendation.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. If I just may come back, the reason I say strategic is that quite often when we have a development, we do look, and quite rightly, look at the local impacts, but that prevents us sometimes from doing major stuff. And sometimes we need to gather 106 together to do significant changes for different developments in the area, for cumulative work, and that's what we need to plan so that we don't waste money. I do accuse highways sometimes down at county, but that they paint pretty lines on the road because that's all they can afford, instead of putting the money into a cumulative pot and doing something really significant with it. And that's what we need to plan as well. So that's just to explain that, Joe.
And I think a good example of that is the way the county council's accumulating money towards Coleshill School.
Yes.
So sometimes it is a local, bit in a field or park, or sometimes it's got to be out of the together. Members, I generally do think it would be good for us to meet, to resurrect that group. I think a key part of it as well needs to be talking to our other partners, such as the primary care group and the county council, who are recipients of the CAF. Yes. Because one of the things I think is missing is when we collect the money and we genuinely pass it over to someone else, we don't actually hear what they've done with it. It has been spent, it's gone out of our account, but I would like, and I'd almost like to give residents a more encompassing view over what the money has actually been spent on. So this would need, I think, a recommendation to council. Is that right, Mr. Toby?
Before you do that, Mr. Brown has been trying to attract your attention for some time.
And Councillor Humphreys as well.
I have to say, members, both of them are not normally shy in coming forward. Councillor Humphreys.
Some of these take such a long time. 106 money, we sit down, we discuss it. It's all time triggered before it happens, etc. And we've had a long period of time since 2008 where there's, because of what happened in the economy, zero interest, for example. And I'm thinking now that 3 or 4 years ago, we talked about 106 money going into Wharton schools. I'm just taking that as an example. 538,000 to put 2 classrooms in. Inflation's raging away now. What is it? Does 106 money link itself to inflation so that you can keep up? You plan to do something, but I would imagine if it's another 2 years before doing Wharton School, we might be 100,000 short by the time we get to. That's the point I'm making. Is there anything we can do to do that? And Mr. Brown's looking at me now, and I know he's going to say no.
I think that the money you get is the money you get, and it's important that the organisation look at the net
You need to spend it as quick as you can.
Well, that will build in the amount of cash that they need to deliver when they're going to deliver. Mr. Brown.
Just to answer that point, Mr. Brown, it depends on the 106. Some 106 agreements are index linked, some are not.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yes, it depends on the details of some of the clauses.
I'm going to write that down for future reference.
Some are index linked. In terms of the actual points I wanted to raise, Mr. Chairman, the first is we already have a 106 group. It hasn't met for about 2 or 3 years, but we have a 106 group which was set up some time ago for this very reason. And it's really a question of resurrecting that rather than setting up a new group. It started off with several meetings to discuss what 106s were, and it's examples of that and how money was used, and certainly a housing officer came along at that stage to do that. So it's a question, I presume Councillor Bell is talking about resurrecting that group or reinstating that group. Secondly, Mr. Chairman, as members should know, in the list of the local development plan scheme, which is a list of things that we have to do, Mrs. Barrett will be preparing a DPD, a development plan document on Section 106 contributions. So that's in the programme already. So therefore, that's the time to have an input into it. And I can see the 106 group having an input into that. But I'll have a word with Dorothy to see how she wants to take that forward and the timetable for that. But that's the way to play with that one. Secondly, the council already has an infrastructure delivery plan. It accompanies the local plan. In that, it shows on every single allocation site what we would be expecting in terms of contributions, and also in terms of the different agencies that are providing that money. And that should be on the website if members haven't seen it already. So therefore, there is a strategic overview, and that's the infrastructure delivery plan, which the council has agreed. And I can ask Dorothy to circulate that to all members, the most up-to-date one we have. That is necessary in the examination on the local plan. The local plan would never have been adopted had we not had that IDP, infrastructure delivery plan, and that was also debated at the examination. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll get Mrs. Barrett to circulate that, but we already do have that, and I can get that to you. And another point is that the point that was made, Section 106 are site specific. Therefore, they deal with the implications from the development on a particular site. Therefore, that's the reason why they may not seem linked up at any particular stage. But in terms of the open space monies that we have available here under 2.8 of the paragraph 2.8, several of the developments in Polesworth and Wharton are going towards development at Abbey Green. So they are being pooled. They are going towards an overall project. They're not single projects like lines on roads. Obviously Simon Powell is the director of the Streetscape and Leisure and Development Director will be looking at that, and that's what he will have the detail on how that's to be spent. And whether he goes through the Community and Environment Board, Mr. Chairman, that's a matter for him. But certainly he has a list of projects that money will be spent on. So therefore, they are linked, and they are linked together when they're dealing with separate sites in settlements. So the Polesworth and Wharton one in particular. And as has been said, there are triggers on these. So therefore, the monies may not come in immediately. They come in as a site is developed through, and that may take several years. And that comes back to Councillor Humphrey's point about index linking. So, Stuart, there are several points in there, and what I'm basically saying is a lot of the matters which have been raised by members are already covered. And I can give a note if you wish, Mr. Chairman, after a later date, to run through some of these points.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I personally still bear the scars of discussing the infrastructure delivery plan. It is important, and I think it will be worth us all having a reflection on that. I do remember now that we have a Section 106 group, but actually it's only relevant if it meets. And I think the point is perhaps it's a couple of years since it's met. I think there's a lot in what you said, Mr. Mayor. For me, that the group should still meet, or rather should meet again. And I think, Councillor, the recommendation should be something along the lines of we recommend to the council that the group is reconstituted, and that Councillor Phillips' group and your group can suggest replacement members, because if that now go, I think some of the members have probably retired. So I think it's important to, well, not some of us have, some of us have, I'm sure. What I'd like that group to do is perhaps at its first meeting have a presentation from leisure service and housing in terms of what their plans are. Because clearly they have them, so it'd be good for us all to be aware and to influence from our particular perspectives, both strategically and strategically, on both senses of what we're talking about, where that might be, because I think members have to own this. That's the cost.
Actually, you said a lot of what I was going to say, Chair, but I was just concerned in resurrecting the group that we don't go with the previous membership, as we look at the constitution of membership, and that but it well, obviously it does need to reflect cross-party sort of membership, and it does need to reflect the primary areas of development that local members being in that.
We wouldn't do it otherwise.
Thank you very much, Chair.
I'm happy with your recommendation to be my recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Chair, so understanding orders, the planning board, as every other board, has a power to appoint bodies, such as subcommittees, and under standing order number 9, if it relates to a matter which is already on the agenda, then you can appoint that board. Now, this is, as I understand it, a body which we dealing solely with the effects of 106 in a planning context, and therefore that would be within the power of the board to establish, rather than needing full council to do it. As you know, at annual council each year we appoint boards, and the membership of boards is determined, and it has to be in almost all instances politically balanced. As you'll know, we haven't appointed to this board, certainly not in the 2 years that I've been, to the Section 106 group in the 2 years that I've been here. And therefore, to that extent, it doesn't really exist on the basis we have no membership for it. So it's completely within your powers tonight to appoint a board and to make it politically balanced. And therefore, you can start meeting, I said board, I mean appoint a subcommittee and make it politically balanced, and then you can start work on that as soon as suits you to do that. And obviously part of that can be receiving a report from Mr Brown and others in relation to the context generally, so you have then can plan your work from.
Thank you, sir. If you're not trying to be kind to Councillor Phillips and myself to give us a chance to think who might wish to, I think we'll probably almost have too many volunteers, but members, if you would leave it to Councillor Phillips and myself to talk to our respective groups over who should be there. I'm sure Councillor Rose, you will have a choice to make within your group as well, as to who would join us.
I'll consult with my group and I'll get back.
So members, I think broadly, as we said before, but I accept what you say, but we just need a little bit of time to actually decide on who.
Can I propose then that we restart this group and leave it to you to sort out the actual membership?
To a point of order, because it has to be a political balance, we have to know how many members would be in it. And then the groups, once that's established, then the group.
Can I suggest that we use the same makeup for the major applications group?
Yeah,
Same numbers.
same numbers. So I think it's like 3, 2, 1.
Is that acceptable?
It's not. That's not exactly balanced, but I think in this instance, I think what we're saying is that we will restart the group with a politically balanced membership, and names to be forwarded by Councillor Phillips, Councillor Rose, and myself.
So 4 Conservative members, 2 Labour members,
3 Labour.
4. Well, it's got to be the balance, whatever the balance is.
Yeah. So it's, I think it's 23, 12.
Yeah.
That's what I think we can trust the two of you and Councillor Rose to come in.
And genuine members, as with all of these planning subgroups, you are all welcome to come and be involved with it. The votes are going to be what the votes are, but everyone can come along and participate. So that's
I've just got a question about the index and linking things to the index. Is that within our control? Is that our choice to link things to the index? Because obviously, if you've got a development that could take 10 years, that's going to be a drastically different figure at the end of it than at the start.
There's also the fact that the cash sits in our account and is invested by the Director of Finance.
So it's whether or not we can make the best use of the money or not.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. First of all, the clause has to go. It has to go in agreement, so it has to be agreed by the applicant and developer as well. But certainly, as Councillor Simpson says, the cash when it comes in is put in an account here, so we gain interest on that as well, and that interest is included in the money to be spent.
But either way, there is a compensation for the inflation.
Sort of.
Yeah, in I suppose in Japanese agreements, it's more common for the periodic payments to have an index link. So if it's a one-off payment of a lump sum, say pre-commencement, that would be a fixed sum. Whereas if it's a payment every year or 2 years, something like that, it's more likely to have an index link.
I think indexation is important, but actually, I'd rather we just got on with it.
Yes, get on with it. But
Can I just say to you, I do think it's important because it hasn't mattered before, but it is. It is running away with inflation. Is running away now. I mean, people are paying twice as much for bricks as they were a year ago. Yeah, it runs away very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So, have you talked yourselves out now? Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Take a vote,
So it's been proposed and seconded that we do what we said. I won't say it again. All those in favour? And that's unanimous again. Thank you very much. We now move on to agenda item number 8, the Water Orton Conservation Area Boundary Extension. Mr. Brown?
Nothing else to report, Mr. Chairman. This has come about through concern from the Water Orton members and community about proposals actually in the centre of the village, and particularly to do with station. And the Heritage Officer has had a look at this and feels that the best way forward is through a conservation area extension. And A, B, C and D on the recommendation outline the programme that would follow on consent being given tonight.
I think this is excellent, members. Well done to all concerned. It's a great piece of work. Councillor Dewitt?
Personally, I support what you've just said and support the recommendations. The question that I've got is that we're told that the demolition of this building could be imminent. Is there anything that we can do to protect it while this process of extending the conservation area boundary goes on?
I understood Network Road had said they wouldn't do that now, but Mr. Brown?
That was our understanding as well, Mr. Chairman, but the report does indicate that we can have an immediate designation for part of the area, and clearly that area is water station.
I'll move the recommendation, Chairman. Just to expedite matters.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes. Thank you. All those in favour? Any against?
Councillor Phillips.
Thank you very much. Members, the next item is the submission of the Water Orton Neighbourhood Plan for referendum. Mr. Brown?
Nothing else, Mr. Chairman. This just follows on from the examination last year.
Chairman.
Seconded, those in favour? Thank you very much, that's unanimous again. We've dealt with agenda item number 10. So members, I now need to move that under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, that the public interest be excluded from the remaining part of the meeting for the remaining items of business on the grounds that involves unlikely disclosure of exempt information as defined by Schedule 12A to the Act, and the items are specified in the agenda and the reasons.
Second. Oh, sorry.
All those in favour? Thank you very much. If we could turn off the recording.